In our society today, it is impossible to go more than 60 seconds without interacting with the software system, because there's nothing you can do in our society without interacting with the software system. You can't talk on the phone. You can't watch TV. You can't microwave popcorn. You can't wash the dishes or your clothes. You can't dry your clothes. You can't drive anywhere without interacting with the software system. How much code is in a modern car? How many lines of code and not a Tesla. Yeah, Tesla's way over the top. Just a normal old modern car. How many lines of code are in that? It's over 100 million. You get into your car, you start to drive it, there's 100 million lines of code executing in that car. Most of it, of course, is in the entertainment system and the GPS system and all that nonsense. But there's a fair bit of code running in the engine. When you put your foot on the brake, do you believe that there's a cable that runs from the brake pedal to the calipers that squeeze on the disc? Or do you realize that there are if statements in the way? And who wrote those if statements? If statements that are going to decide whether or not to stop the car when you push on the brake. How many people have died because of failures in those if statements? Dozens. There are dozens of people who have died in automobile accidents because the software that controlled the brakes and the accelerator failed for some stupid reason. You and I are killing people. Now, we didn't get into this business to kill people. Most of us are programmers because one day we walked into a store and we saw some dumb computer on a rack and we typed 5 lines of BASIC to put a print statement that printed our name into an infinite loop, and we saw our name going up the screen and went, yeah, that's what I want to do for the rest of my life. But now we're killing people. We didn't want to get into a business where you could do that. Not only can you kill people with software, you can lose massive fortunes. Who knows about Knight Capital? Who's heard about the fiasco at Knight Capital about 6 years ago? Right? I'm not going to go into all the details. Just some guy made one dumb mistake, and it was just a little dumb mistake, but he managed to lose $450 million in 45 minutes. Our society runs on software. Nothing happens in our society without software nowadays. It didn't used to be that way. Wasn't that way in the 1960s. Wasn't that way in the 70s. Wasn't that way in the 80s. But today, our society runs on software. There is nothing you can do without software. You cannot buy anything. You cannot sell anything. You cannot pass a law. You cannot enforce a law. You can't get insurance policies. You can't get claims from insurance policies. You can't get money out of the bank without software. Software runs everything. And our society does not yet realize just how dependent it is on software. You and I probably don't realize it very well. Just how dependent everything is on software. And who writes that software? We do. We rule the world. Other people think they rule the world. Then they hand those rules to us. And we write the rules that run in the machines that govern everything. We need to talk to people about taxes now. Since we rule the world, seems fair that we shouldn't have to pay any taxes, but we'll come back to that later. Does society understand just how dependent it has become on us? The answer to that is no, not yet, although there have been hints. There have been moments when we thought maybe society would wake up to this fact. The event that will eventually, of course, cause society to wake up is when some poor programmer does one dumb thing and kills 10,000 people at a shot. And it's not hard to imagine what that would be. Right? You think for a few minutes, you'll realize, there's about 7 dozen ways you could kill 10,000 people with a little software failure. And when that occurs, and you know it's going to occur, At some point in time, some poor software idiot is going to do some dumb thing and kill 10,000 people. And when that occurs, the politicians of the world will rise up in righteous indignation, as they should, and they will point their finger right at us. And you might like to think, oh no, they're not going to point their finger at me. They'll point their finger at my boss or my company because it's not me. But we saw what happened when the CEO of Volkswagen North America testified before the American Congress about why the software in Volkswagens was cheating the environmental protection machines in California. And the Congress asked that CEO, how could you have let this happen? And the CEO answered, and I quote, "It was just a couple of software developers who did this for whatever reason." Unquote. Now, he was right. It was a couple of software developers who did it, although it was not for some reason. They knew exactly why they were doing it. By the way, those software developers are in jail now, as they should be. So when the event occurs and the politicians rise up and say, we got to do something about these programmers, they're out of control, and they point their fingers at us and they say, okay, how could you have let this happen? We'd better have an answer for them. Because if our answer is, my boss told me we had to get it done by Tuesday, if that is our answer, then the politicians of the world will hang their heads in disappointment and shame and disgust, and they will do the one thing that we don't ever want them to do. They will legislate. They will regulate. And they will tell us what languages we can use and what platforms we have to write on and what courses we have to take and what books we have to read, what processes we have to follow and what signatures we have to get, and we will all become civil servants. I would like to avoid this. So how do you avoid it? Well, you get there first. You get there first by establishing the ethics of software development. What is our ethics? Do we have a stated set of ethics? Do we have a set of standards, a set of moral standards that all programmers follow? Do programmers take an oath to uphold a set of standards, a set of ethics? We don't have that. We don't have a profession because of that. Because in order to have a profession, you have to have something you profess. And we don't profess anything at this point in time. We're going to have to come up with this. We're going to have to learn to adopt a set of standards and ethics so that when the politicians of the world do point at us, and they will, and they say, how could you have let this happen? We can respond by saying, look, this was a horrible accident, and we regret it, but it was not due to our negligence. And we can prove it was not our negligence because here are the standards that we enforce. Here are the morals that we adhere to. These are the ethics that we claim to profess. And if we can say that to the politicians of the world, then when the politicians of the world decide to regulate us, they will know how to do it because they will simply take the rules that we've already invented and turn them into law. This is what's happened to doctors, it's what happened to lawyers, it's what happened to architects, it's what happened to everybody. It's going to happen to us as well. And so, you and I have to begin this thought process on what our ethics is. What do we value? What is it that a software developer holds dear? And one of those things had better be the cleanliness of code. So let's talk about that.